Hey everyone, welcome back to Make It Happen Mondays, where we talk about sales, business, entrepreneurship, personal growth, mental health, and everything in between with guests who I truly respect and I think make a positive impact on the world around us. And today's guest is my good friend, Lori Richardson, who is one of my favorite people out there, no question about it. She is the founder and sales strategist for Score More Sales, a sales training organization that actually does assessments on your sales org and then prescribes real training as opposed to just throwing training on top, which I think is a brilliant idea. And I should probably do more of it. She's also an author, a speaker, and the host of the podcast Conversations with Women in Sales. And she is one of the biggest and best proponents of women in sales, but also just sales in general. And the reason I wanted to have her on the podcast is because, first of all, I didn't realize that I hadn't had her on the podcast, so shame on me. But we've had so many conversations in the past that I just unfortunately assumed that she had been on the podcast. But her story of resilience is so incredible that I just thought more people needed to hear it. I mean, she grew up in Seattle, didn't have a lot going for her early age. You know, her grandmother, Mimi, who was a sold fine apparels and kind of was the rock in her life and really showed her what strong female independence and direction was way back in the day, right? And how she kind of got into high school and she didn't like it, so she bailed and got her GED and then moved into her associate's degree with early childhood, but then became a mom at 18 or 19. And unfortunately was in a very abusive relationship and found her way out of it. But she bet on herself. So she took her son, who was huge into hockey, and she got into sales, full 100% commission. I mean, you want to bet on yourself, have no job, have a kid, get out of a relationship that is abusive, and get into a 100% commission job. I mean, I don't know if I have that kind of grit in me to be able to do that, but she did. And she has made an incredible career ever since. And not only leading the way in some of huge deals that she's closed for some of the organizations that she's worked for, but also championing sales for women, but also for everybody, just to all level up. I look to her for advice myself, as far as building businesses, as far as sales and structure and all that fun stuff. I look to her constantly for this. And if you want to see us in action, you can actually Google Jay Barrow's We Need to Talk. And this was our conversation about the bro culture in sales and how it needs to change. So I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did. And I encourage you to share this episode with other people who might be struggling and need some motivation to keep going. So let's make it happen. Lori Richardson, welcome to the Make It Happen Monday podcast, my friend, my dear friend, Lori Richardson. How are you?
So great to see you, John. I miss you being in Arizona now, but doing really well. Thank you.
That's great to hear. And we were just talking before this. I can't believe you haven't been on this podcast. I think it's really genuinely because we've had so many conversations that I just assumed one of them was on the podcast. So shame on me for not getting you on here earlier, but I'm really excited to kind of dive into this and help share your story and some of the stuff that you're both seeing out there in sales right now. So
yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah. So for those and by the way, we'll get into this, but for those of you listening, there was a very powerful thing that Lori and I did with Trish Bertuzzi and
Casey Johns.
Thank you, Casey, called We Need to Talk. And so I encourage everybody to go on Google and type in We Need to Talk, Jay Barrow's blog, and you will see a very powerful conversation we had based on a very big asshole that we all know, Grant Cardone, and everybody knows I hate him. And I still think we need to do a follow-up to that because I think we still need to talk. But
and unfortunately, it's evergreen content. I mean, you could listen to it and you wouldn't know that we did it years ago, which is sad.
That's his. And that I think it was you I talked to. I was like, hey, we still need to talk. I'm like, have we made any progress? And you were like,
not a lot.
So, but we'll get into that. But Lori, I think one of the main reasons I wanted to get you on here formally is to tell your story a little bit, because I think you have such a unique story of ups and downs and how you got into sales and why you got into sales that shows a lot of resilience, a lot of agility, And also, basically in a man's world of the 80s and 90s of sales, you carving your path. And I think it's inspirational for a lot of reasons, not just women out there who are wondering if this is really the profession for them, if they can make it and all that stuff, but also for just anybody looking who goes through struggles, who doesn't think that they can make it or that they're stuck in whatever position they're in. And so that's really why I wanted to have this conversation with you, but then also talk to you about, like we were saying before we got on here, we're a little bit of the old guard here. People are starting to call me the, Godfather. I'm like, whoa, Godfather. I'm like, if you're talking like Godfather, 1, 2, and 3, no. But if you're talking like Mitch, when it comes to, the old school movie, like that Godfather, all right, I'll take that one, but don't put me in the old school Godfather thing. So I think there's a lot of insights, and I think both of you and I try to keep reinventing ourselves, or at least evolving here, to share what we're learning with the younger generation to help them move up a spot. So we'll talk about that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Sounds good.
Perfect. So even though we connected in Boston, you grew up in Seattle.
Yes.
And I want to start with I was at Mimi, your grandma.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went, so talk to me about that, because that was like your first retail experience, right? You were the youngest of 5 kids. Yeah. And this gave you a little bit of an escape. So could you start there? Because I always love to hear where people's entrepreneurship comes from, where their sales kind of DNA is formed.
Yeah. Working for my grandmother was my saving grace, because my mom had migraine headaches when I grew up, and she was on heavy narcotics. Oh. I mean, my dad was a pharmacist, so it worked out really well. Yeah. Worked out really well for that. And so she did, I'm not faulting them. They did the best they could with what they had, but I had, I had less direction as being the youngest of 5. They were kind of like, oh my gosh, we're done. Let's focus.
You're on your own, kid.
Yeah, exactly. And so I worked for my grandmother from the time I was, 8 or 9. I was in her dress shop. She had a fine women's apparel store, which was kind of funny because it was in an area of Seattle called Lake City, which was not, it was not high end, but she had a high end place. She ended up, she had radio commercials. She had fashion shows at the swankiest restaurant in downtown Seattle. And, she was a high end kind of gal. So I learned a lot from her, because she didn't discount other than once a year. And she did word of mouth. She did all these important things that I didn't understand until later on. And I didn't even know she was a role model until later, but she stood up to the men who she had to buy the merchandise from, and they would tell her she's crazy, she's too old. And she would tell them, go to hell, and she would say, my customers won't wear that. These salesmen would come in from New York and LA. And she'd say, no, they won't wear that style. And then later on, when we go back to the market week, they'd go, oh, Mrs. Hall, you were right. It was a fad. And, nice. She, so I learned, she was like the first woman I ever saw really stand up to the system,
Where'd she get her chops? Like where did that come from? Usually I'd ask your origin story, but now I'm kind of curious about your mom's origin story. Like, where did she get that confidence to do that? Because that back then, that must have stood out like a sore thumb.
Yeah. Well, it was tough on my mom, because my grandma got divorced very early, and that was very unfashionable in my mom's generation. They had a name for people like that. And my grandmother, she was a buyer somehow she got a job as a buyer in a store in Portland, Oregon in women's apparel. So she used to take the train to LA, and she, I don't know, she just developed, we never had that conversation, unfortunately.
Yeah. That's always interesting, right? Because I think you said that you didn't know that was kind of your mentor, and you didn't know what you were learning. It was the same thing with my parents. Like, I didn't realize I was an entrepreneur, but both my parents, they never called it entrepreneurship back then. But my mom left, when I was born, I was 9 years older than my sister. My mom had a job at Wang Laboratories, and like high level job. And she quit to take care of me, because she wanted me to have the same experience, but she didn't quit just to take care of me. She started her own consultancy out of the house. When I came home, I walked into the living room. On the right-hand side was my mom's office. On the left-hand side was the TV. And my dad, FAA consultant, he worked out of his office in the top of the second floor, smoking 3 packs of Reds a day, just hammering through top secret shit. And to me, that was normal. You know what I mean? Like both my parents worked out of the house. I could go and knock on the doors, and that entrepreneurial like spirit, if you will, didn't hit me until later on when I got into corporate, and I was like, ew, like, I don't know why I don't like this, but fuck, I don't like this at all.
Who's this jerk in the corner office that wants to fire everybody?
Yeah, exactly. So were you paying attention to like those fashion shows, like the pitches and like how she was presenting things? That like, were you consciously or subconsciously recognizing
I used to read Women's Wear Daily when I was like 9-10 years old, and just saw the merchandising is part of selling, how you display things. This was visual, and I'm very visual, which is interesting. And so from that aspect, for sure. But she would have women come in and they'd say, I like this pantsuit, but it's in a size 12 and I'm a 10. And she'd go, oh, honey, they run small. Just try it on. And so whether they did or didn't, I'm not sure. I don't think she lied, but she, her point was just put it on and then we'll look at it. So I grew up with lots of that in my head. Love it.
So then in high school, high school wasn't for you, right? You kind of, did you drop out? Like why, what was that for you? Cause you got your GED, but high school you said wasn't for you.
I was fine with middle school, and I used to walk to my grandmother's store after school. But in high school, it just seemed so stupid. People were either getting high and drinking, and they were like the cool kids, the jocks, I don't know what it was about it, but I went for a year, and then someone told me that it wasn't like, hey, you should drop out. It was more like, you can take a test and you don't have to go to high school anymore. And I was like, what is this test?
It's a magic test.
And so I found out about it. I didn't study for it. I just walked in. And I passed. And I thought, what the heck was I supposed to do? Obviously, looking back, I didn't have any adults giving me any good advice. I didn't have anyone saying, hey, you're going to miss this, that, and the other thing. What are you going to do next? But what I did was I went to the local community college, and I got into early childhood education. I had my degree, my 2-year degree, when everybody was graduating from high school. So that would have been a great plan. And then I could have gone on to college. But of course, I got pregnant, I got married, and I ended up marrying somebody who was physically abusive, and we left for our lives.
Yeah, that was around like you said you were 19 as a single mom. And
I was 19. Imagine being 19 years old and you have this little baby. And all of a sudden it was like, wow, this isn't really what I planned to go to college, planned to get things done. But I ended up being a teacher, which is one of the things I wanted to do. Unfortunately, it didn't pay. And working with kids, especially young kids, it was a minimum wage job. And I could have made more flipping burgers somewhere, probably.
Yeah, unfortunately, not much has changed in that regard. So then was sales a conscious, like, I can't make enough. Was there a kind of an inflection point for you where you were like, okay, I know I can't support my family, my kid, my son. And so I have to find something else, or was it more of like a gradual and an opportunistic scenario?
It's interesting. I'd like to say that I was well thought out, but what I wanted to be paid what male counterparts made. So that was my goal, was to make more money. I didn't know the sales route. So I took a non-traditional program for women, and it was like an apprenticeship program kind of. And we did all these, blue collar jobs. I poured cement. We did scaffolding. I mean, I want to make more money. I wanted some good pay. And then the guy came in and talked about technology. And I was like, ooh, this is really cool. And somehow something in my head said, maybe I could sell that, because that was a time when I was in Seattle. This is where Microsoft was founded. Bill Gates said, we're going to put a computer on every desk. And I thought, I can sell that. I could sell those. And somehow I had that confidence, which a lot of people don't seem to have. And most people don't intentionally go into sales. And I just plastered my resume all over Seattle and I went to a computer show, I remember. And, mind you, this was the early 1980s. And I found a company that gave me a chance. And the guy that interviewed me, one of the salesmen, he was a top salesman, and he worked with at the time it was a big 8 accounting firms. And he was a former Cadillac salesman.
Nice.
Yeah. And he said, his name was Dale Broman. I'll never forget. And he just kept saying, but do you like to sell? But do you like to sell? And I go, yeah, I think I do. And I didn't really know it, but I had that chip on my shoulder. I had that, I'm going to prove everybody wrong. I'm this young mom. We're meant to fail. We're set up as society thinks we're going to go to welfare, and I just kept at it. And they said to me, there's more here in just spare change, just in side work than in any other job. And so I started on straight commission.
That's
you get a draw for a couple of months, but I was super stressed about it. But I was making minimum wage. So like, how low could I fall? Right. So if nothing else, I could go work at Dick's Drive-In, which was a big drive-in in Seattle back then. So I did it and never looked back. And I, to this day, decades later, sales is an admirable profession. And if you're in a poor economic status, it's a way you can raise yourself out. And I've seen multiple people do it. I'm sure you have too.
Oh yeah. And that's why I'm such a proponent of it, because I do think it's not, and we'll get into this, it's not the ultimate equalizer, right? There's still prejudice. There's still sexism. There's still the chips are stacked against you, but at least it's a profession that does tie effort to outcome, right?
Yes.
Like the harder you work, usually the more you get paid, and the harder you work, the better you get. And the better you get, the more you get paid. So, you still might not be quote unquote equal in a lot of ways if you pan it out, but it's at least
even the smarter and the more creative.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure you would agree. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but we could be dropped into any city in America and sell our way out of town. It's not like the factory's closing. What are we going to do? Like and if you lose deals, like we've talked about this, economy, the market change and everything, it's, you don't just sit and you can feel bad for a couple of days, but at some point you shift and you find another strategy. And that's what we do as sales professionals.
I mean, that couldn't be more. I mean, we talked about this, early 2023, I went from 6 million to 0 in fucking 2 months. Yeah. And I remember just sitting there in my office, like looking out my window being like
that's
okay, haven't seen this yet. Like this one's one of the worst. Like, It's not like I lost a $500,000 deal or I missed my forecast here. I'm like, I have 20 employees. I have a burn of $400,000, and I went down and I went from 6 million to 0 in 3 months. Or in 2 months. I'm like, all right, let's figure this out. and
but
that
it's
actually
figure-outable, right? It's you find a new way, and looking back, it might be too soon. I don't know, but it's I don't think it is, but you see that, there are ups and downs in life and business, and we figure things out. And that's what we do as sales professionals.
Couldn't I ask you, so we had this conversation, I was telling you I was in New York yesterday, and Sarah Yui, who's young, getting in there, building their brand and everything else. And we were talking about, women in sales and the challenges, and there's the excuse side of the house, and then there's the motivation side of the house. And I'm desperately trying to figure out this with Charlotte, because, you talk about grit, and if people listen to my podcast, they know that I've asked a bunch of times to a bunch of people, like, do you need to go through some super hardship, right, to develop grit? And the overwhelming feedback is yes, but I'm an example of the opposite. I grew up, I mean, again, I think we had talked, like Susie Welsh, when I worked for Jack and Susie Welsh for a little while, she asked me my origin story, and I told her, I was like, oh, my parents are, married for 50 something years. My sister's this and that, went to school, did this. And when I was done, she was like, wow, you're the one. And I was like, what? She's like, the 2.5 kids, white picket fence thing. Like you're the actual one that's describing. And it hit me like a ton of bricks at that moment. I was like, fuck. Cause I'm thinking all my friends who were divorced, parents divorced, and the shit that they went through. But I feel like I have grit. And so I guess the question is for you.
Because you're from Boston.
Well, if that's the East Coast,
Boston thing. Yeah.
I think that helps.
It does.
but specifically for women,
Yeah.
you do hear a lot of women in any non-white male scenario. There's some people that use it all as an excuse. Oh, the deck's stacked against me. Woe is me. And then you use the other ones like, fuck it. Like Sarah, she was like, I don't give a fuck. She's like, my dad was a piece of shit. This, that, and the other thing, and whatever. And yeah, my mom was a CEO of a company and she made a bunch of money. And so I lived like, she's like, I actually relate more towards your story, John, that nothing, bad happened to me, even though I have this horrible thing here. But I could have used this horrible thing over here from my dad and all this other shit to drag me down, but I didn't. She's like, I have no connection to it. So could you help, like, all the different things you've seen personally, but also the people you've worked with, where does that, like, it become okay to talk about the challenges that we face, but it's like, okay, now we have to fucking do something about this. And now you have to pull yourself up and fucking make it happen.
Yeah. And I share my origin story because I don't want to dwell on it. And in fact, you were the one that told me, why don't you share this story more often? Because I feel like, I have 2 or 3 times, and it's got to be somewhere on LinkedIn. If you Google me, you can find it. But people don't, that people are not tracking you every moment of everything, every word that you said. And I mean, for sure, using excuses is not going to support you in sales. I believe in, the idea of having supportive beliefs. So you want to say things to yourself like, so my son is involved in sports and athletics. I've been around that for forever, since I was, probably 24, 25 years old. And we have to say things that support us. If you're a competitive athlete and you lose a game on Friday night and you have a game Saturday, you got to forget that. It's no different in sales. So you're the home team and you have to support yourself. So having some story about this won't work because of that, you got to shift that. So successful salespeople don't do that. So that's the first thing. Those top reps we're talking about, they don't have that baggage. And when I hear people will approach me, I'm an older woman in sales, and a woman approached me recently and said, these kids are interviewing and I never get a second interview, and, they think I'm too old. And I said, no, you think you're too old. I said, you need to stop. I said, don't tell me about it. Don't, this is my advice to you, is that think about what you have going for you and sell that, push that, promote that. There's no room for that. Nobody wants to hear it. And so I don't care who it is, if it's a woman or man, I'm the first person to say, you don't have room for excuses in this industry that I'm in, maybe somewhere else, but maybe in the, on the somewhere else where people sit around and complain. Yeah. But I don't like those people.
No. And that's the problem. It's like, and that's why the challenge for me is nature nurture, right? Is how much of that is nature versus nurture, and can you nurture it? Because, there's plenty of examples where, my wife's one of them, where parents got divorced early age. Kim took it and said, fuck this, I'm going to, succeed and all this other stuff, even at that young age, where her sister, dragged her down into the dump. You know what I mean? And one is now deep depression. The other one's doing great. You know what I mean? And it's like same, okay, her sister was a little bit older, and so was impacted a little bit more because the teenage thing versus, 9 versus 13 when that happened. So I'm not going to discount that. And I also, by the way, I'm not going to discount the mental, like the genuine physiological things that have certain people have that others don't, right?
There's some real issues people have.
Yeah. Sure. Like depression is a real thing. I don't understand depression. I get sad, but I don't understand depression. So I can't talk to that. So I do think people are wired a certain way, but I also think there's a mental, you talked about the mental side of this and how important that is compared to everything else.
Yeah. And it's, we used to call it being positive versus being negative. I think both those words have a lot of baggage.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, John, you're so positive when all these other people are looking for jobs. It's like, no, you have supportive beliefs. You say things that support yourself moving forward. And when you say things that don't support you, it's important to catch them and to realize what you're doing. You're doing that to yourself. And if you're saying it out of your mouth, you're doing it to everyone around you. So the one guy on the sales team that says, oh, John, that'll never work because we tried it before. It's like, well, what if it did work? And how would that happen? And what if we shifted? So I'm not going to say you're being negative, but I'm going to say, let's be more supportive toward our goals, because that's what we're here for. We're here to move forward.
That reminds me, like when I started at Basho, he had a whole list. My least favorite boss on the planet, it was not Jeff. Jeff is my favorite person, but my actual VP was a douche. Anyways, he asked me like to put all these, all the names of clients that might be target accounts for us based on the profile. I just walk in day one, right? And PTC was on the list. And he's looking through the list because I had a friend who worked in like the finance department. So I was like, I don't know, maybe I can ask him for an intro. And my boss is like, oh, don't even take them off your list. I was like, why? He goes, well, I've tried to get in there, didn't work. CEO tried to get it. Jeff tried to get in there, didn't work, blah, blah, blah. He's like, they don't do outside vendor training. And I was like, I was like, you want to bet? And he was like, what? I was like, I'll bet you I can get in there. Right. And he's like, I was like, oh no, he asked me, I go, I bet you I can get in there. He's like, oh, I'll bet you. I was like, okay, well, what's the bet? He's like, I'll give you $1,000. I was like, on top of my commissions. And I was like, he's like, yep. I'm like, game fucking on. So one thing leads to another. I get in. It's one of my favorite closes of all time. Right. And I go back to him. I'm like, all right, give me my goddamn $1,000. And he fucking negged on it. I was like, you piece of shit. Anyways, but it was just the joy of being like, you tell me I can't do this. Like now this is the number one thing I'm going to focus on doing.
And haven't you heard that time and time again?
Oh.
I mean, I remember talking to, I think was it Natasha Sakat, maybe she got the worst territory when she got into sales because they didn't want her to succeed because she was female, and she turned it into a top territory in New York City. And, it happens. There's so many hero stories like that.
That's why my tolerance for my territory sucks is almost zero. Because the exact thing, like Xerox, they gave me the shittiest state and local government. They had 6 reps in 5 years, like zero trust, nothing. And they gave it to me. And I'm like, okay, great. And they're like, this territory hasn't produced shit in years. So good luck. I was like, oh, fuck. But then turned it into the best territory within a year and a half and everything else. So
yeah.
It's just, to me, I'm trying to figure it out right now because of Charlotte, right?
Yeah.
She's not going to have to struggle for much. Like it is what it is. We're in a position with our lives and our careers that she's not going to need, she goes to a private school. She is this, we try to instill the values and all that stuff. But the grit factor is like, when is that going to kick in? And I'm like, as a parent, I'm like, I can't force it, but it's killing me to not see that. Right, because your son early on, was hockey and just fucking all in, right? Like how early was your kid?
Well, it's funny because he got a scholarship to prep school. Mm-hmm. And I remember when he got that scholarship, I thought we were so lucky. Like, how lucky are we that this, we didn't have that money at the time. And he was going there. And what I realized over time is that a lot of the wealthy kids that he hung around for the next 3 years, he had a much higher work ethic than a lot of them. Not all. There's some great kids, and it wasn't money dependent for sure. But there were some kids where at the end, when he graduated, I thought, how lucky were they that he was there, because he worked hard. That's what he had, he had hard work. That was what he brought to the table. And that's what helped him out a lot. And then he went on to Northeastern, and I had friends back in Seattle, these hockey dads that were like, well, he got in, but will he ever play? And he worked his ass off, and, he played for 3 years, and then he played professionally. And, he played in hundreds of games professionally as a professional player. Now he's an assistant coach at a top university in Minneapolis. So, and that was hard work.
Let me ask you on that journey, right? Because you became a hockey mom, and you went to all the tryouts and all the travel, and you even had I remember you had like kids come over to the house. You housed a bunch of them.
Yeah, we had players, Seattle Thunderbirds. It's a major junior team that live at our house because they were all trying to get into the NHL. So that's what that league was all about.
So with all those travels and watching coaching and watching, hard work and all that other stuff, what did you pick up that was different? Like, so you had been in sales and you're doing all that. Did hockey teach you anything about coaching and mentalities and that type of stuff?
Yeah, I see great parallels. And it's funny because, a lot of people will say women don't like to hear about sports, and that, a lot of times we use all these sports analogies, and I do that, and I have to catch myself because Leon and I figured I've probably seen over 1,000 hockey games that are professional or collegiate or youth. And that's a lot. That's a lot of hockey. But what I most am impressed with are the coaches, like you said, and watching them, and the best coaches and also the worst coaches. And I remember when Leon almost quit hockey because he had this horrible coach. The coach wouldn't talk to him and tell him what he wasn't doing. He was just benching him. And so I talked to Leon, and he'd say, he won't tell me anything. And I talked to the coach. We never all got together, which was stupid. But the coach said he knows exactly what to do. And he was just an ass. And ultimately we ended up going to Tony Robbins for 3 days in Vancouver. And
No way.
Because I was afraid he wanted to quit hockey. And I said, you can quit hockey, but you got to find something else to do, because he was so involved in it. And so we drove up to Vancouver. It was actually a gift through the Anthony Robbins Foundation, Tony Robbins Foundation at the time. So we both went, and he walked on hot coals with Tony Robbins. He thought it was super cool. And then he got accepted to prep school, like not long after that. So, connection, I don't know, but it changed his life, because he was not the kid that was being picked. They wasn't one of the top players, and he went from not, being as strong to, just working hard and being focused and knowing what he wanted.
Love it.
Yeah.
I think we all, I keep asking my mom, like, where did I ever kind of click into this high gear? And she was like, no, she's like, you were always just, she thinks I was money motivated, but looking back on it, because I was always trying to make money, whatever, but that wasn't the point. My thing was, I always wanted what I wanted. So if I wanted something, I didn't want to have to ask for it or wait for it or whatever. I wanted it. So therefore I needed to make money to get what I wanted. And so it was more of like the means to an end for me. And, freedom for me is, I've gone through the core value exercise and all that stuff. And freedom is like a screaming top 3 for me.
And money is freedom. Let's face it. That's what
I
tell younger people coming out when they go, oh, I don't really care about the money. It's like, money is freedom.
Yeah.
Like, you should care about the money.
100%. And people say, well, and it's true. Like, money doesn't buy. My thing is, when people say money doesn't buy happiness, I'm like, yeah, okay, but it sure as shit gets rid of unhappiness.
Get you to Costa Rica, though. Right?
Fuck yeah, right. So like, and I'll be happy in Costa Rica. So, but that freedom to have your kid go to school, you know what I mean? Like, pay for this and pay for that. That to me was always my motivator. So now let's kind of get into the 80s for you because you worked at
really in the 80s.
Well, yeah, sorry. So, but you worked at like Apple, IBM, and HP.
Well, I was funded by them. So I had roles. Yeah. It was like, the channel. Today it's called the channel, but I had roles that were funded by those guys. And I went to corporate and I went to trade shows on their behalf. And I was business development rep and different roles, but worked my way up through, selling into enterprise and yeah, so I had a wide variety of trainings. There was a lot of manufacturer training back then.
I was going to say, how good was the training back then as you reflect back on it?
Some of it was really good. It's like anything. It's like I had 23 bosses. Some were great, some were awful, right? Yeah. But the training generally, IBM had a really great training program. And you didn't just get thrown out to the wolves and get handed a phone. You had training and coaching and mentoring and stuff like that. So I really appreciated that.
Do you think, because I'm presenting to Pavilion at the end of August, and
good.
I'm doing a lot of research right now. It's called Anything But Predictable, and it's basically saying the SDR model is a fucking joke. It always has been, but right now it's an obvious joke. And what I'm proposing is we actually go back to, because I grew up at Xerox, right? 8-week sales training program, right? And I was always full cycle. Like this whole SDR thing is like, wow. Like if I had an SDR back then, I would have treated him like a god, because like, I don't want to do that shit, but thank you. I can't believe AEs treat SDRs like shit. It doesn't make any sense to me. But it was more about the fact that, to your point, like we didn't just get, here's your territory, good luck. It was, 8-week sales training program, then an apprenticeship, then and everything else. So what I'm proposing is we actually go back to that, and we spend the first 2 years, because if you think of any GTM role, sales, marketing, rev ops, you name it, enablement, none of them you get taught in college to do the actual job. Like, I got my degree in marketing. As soon as I got into the real world, I was like, wait, nothing that I learned in school is fucking relevant to anything that's happening right now, right? So because of that, GTM generalist role first year, where they get exposed to all the different GTM roles, but they're like an admin effectively for the full cycle sales rep. Then GTM specialist second year, where they pick a lane, right? And they start to like lean a little bit more on that. But flat salary, no commissions, nothing, cost of sale baked in, but education throughout. And what I'm really trying to do is run the finances to see, yes, Xerox can do it, IBM can do it because they have billions of dollars and they can do those things, but can a 10-person sales team do that? Can a, $2 million revenue business do that? And I think they can. And so do you think we need to get back to a little bit crawl before you walk scenario when it gets into
I
sales?
love what you're talking about. And I love the idea of moving around, because now there's rev ops. There wasn't that before, right? There's so many adjacent roles to selling. Get the sales fundamentals down, because you'll use them the rest of your life, no matter what you do, whether you go off in another career or you're an entrepreneur, you're going to need those sales skills. So I'd have a heavy concentration on that, and then branch off into some of these different paths, because people will see, and you shouldn't have to say, well, I think I would like this better. I think customer success might be good. Why don't you get to try it out and see? So I love that idea. And I love the idea of staying close to sales. I've seen too many women leave sales, John. I mean, in the last few years, and it started with the pandemic. And then a lot of women didn't want to go back in the office. I saw women managers and leaders that just left, and we lost some good people. And now it's just more like, oh, I'm just tired of this, that not being heard, or found out my colleague who's male is making more money than me. It still happens. And so, not to everybody, but there's some great companies out there, and shout out to the companies that are doing it right. Thank you. But there are a lot of women that are just like, you know what? I can be a fractional whatever now. It's like cool and acceptable.
Yeah, well, I there's been unfortunately, a lot of those women who have reached out to me saying, this fractional thing I thought was going to be awesome, but now
doesn't work.
And now there's 8 million fractional whatevers. And
I know.
So I think I need to get back.
Agree.
I'm like, yeah, now you're trying to plug back into, now things have changed drastically over the past 2 years with AI and everything like that. So if you haven't updated your skills on AI, you trying to get back into that CRO role.
Yeah, not going to happen.
You're going to get discriminated. Then you're going to think it's discrimination because of age and all this other shit, when it's really you unplugged, unfortunately, to try to kind of create that lifestyle that you wanted, and now you're trying to plug back into a different world, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it always goes back to finding a company that you respect, and finding leaders that you want to work for. And I say that to anyone. Don't just take a role because it's a role. Yeah. Find the people that will invest in you and help you grow. Because I'm still growing at my age. If I don't learn every day, I mean, I'm done. Done.
Did you ever feel like giving up? When I say that, like on the path that you were at, and you're just like, so in sales, right? Where you just like, you got to a point where you're just like, I can't deal with the sexism anymore. I can't deal with this bullshit anymore. I can't deal with this. Was there ever a point in your mind, like where you were just like, no, this isn't for me?
No, it was always, and I think that's what we have from working in sales, is that we have this brain that just figures out a different way. Now, I have had many bad things happen, and I've been passed over for promotion. I was removed from the Boeing account when I was doing $1 million a month in revenue. I mean, I sold $1 million a month in, a month out. And then my buddy who was selling to Microsoft, he was doing $1 million a month in, a month out. We'd have these contests for a long time, but I got taken off the account. And it was because I'm a single parent, and Ted, my buddy Ted, who's still somewhere on LinkedIn, he had a wife at home taking care of her kids, and so he could travel when needed. So I mean, I had a valid lawsuit, but instead I went to the competition, and I took took some of the business away.
Nice.
And then that company I worked for ended up going out of business, not because of me, but
Yeah.
but they just were not sound. It was not good leadership. And I went to a better company. So there's always a new, it's just put a twist on it. What can I do differently? I don't even use the word discrimination. It's funny. I've heard you say it, and I don't even think of that word. I just think of, some people like it, some people don't. And if I'm not getting the right vibe from where I am, I'll just go somewhere else. I don't push it anymore. I don't have to make you like me.
No, I think same thing with training too, right? It's like you can't force people to take training. It's like, that's why I go 10, 60, 30. I go 10% of you is going to take it, 60% something, right? Because I used to, when I don't know about you, but when I first started training, I was so passionate about it because it worked so well for me that if there was 30 people in the room and you were in the back of the room on your iPhone, I'd be like, Lori, eyes up, come on, let's pay attention here. And I literally would try to stuff it down your throat because I knew it was good. Now I say to them, I'm like, look, I don't give a shit if you don't give a shit. So if you're going to sit there on your phone, if you're going to be off screen, if you're going to not be paying attention, that is your problem, not mine. I'm still getting paid to do this. So for the 2 to 3 people that are fucking paying attention, you're the ones I'm actually training. Everybody else, good luck with your lives. And I don't give a shit about you. So
yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
The value thing I think you bring up is like, go where you're appreciated or go where leadership can support you.
Yeah.
So what is that process for somebody that you've worked with in the past who has kind of a negative, like they're looking for their new opportunity? Do you kind of coach them to say, hey, like A, can I get grounded again? And then B, really start to look for people that align with that?
Yeah, totally. And do it through introductions.
Yeah.
Who do you know that, values all the employees, that values the sales team members, that's going to invest in them and help them develop and tell them what their path could be. Because we know over time the good people and the ones who are horrible, we know the horrible companies and we know the horrible people. And luckily we don't broadcast it, but if you can always tell me on the side if there's somebody I need to know not to send people to, but
yeah, I got plenty of them.
But that's what I would look for now is because your direct manager is so important, right?
Oh, it's everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like a teacher, going back to that, right? Like it's amazing how you talk to people who are becoming incredible at whatever it was. And they can always point back to that teacher of science that they weren't really interested in science, but that teacher was so incredible at explaining them. And then all of a sudden they lit them up on fire of like, oh my God, science can be cool. And now they're Neil deGrasse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like
my one class in high school that I liked was zoology with Mr. Gantert. I'll never forget it. Yeah. Although I didn't go to, I don't work at the zoo, but I do like going there.
So let's kind of move forward to today. So score more sales. You've been doing this for a while. I think both of us ups and downs with building these wonderful little sales training consulting firms here. You take a very interesting approach that I wish more people would, which is kind of assessing first as opposed to just giving training, right? I mean, going back to that 10%, the only reason I sleep at night when I do the 10%, when I train big companies and I know that they're not going to do the follow-up or any of that stuff is that I know for a fact that there's 5 to 10% of the reps in that room that I know the light bulb is going to go off with, but that's not the right way to do it. Right. So talk to me about your balance between kind of the science and art of sales, but also training.
Yeah. And, I started out as a trainer too, and I left corporate and I would go in and work with a team. And then I'd check back later and I'd say, well, John, how much did it help the team? And you'd be like, I don't know, because there's no way to measure it. There are no benchmarks. And that's when I started looking around for how could I measure how we did before and how we did after. And that's where I found some tools that we could wrap services around, and we can help companies hire stronger salespeople, stronger sales managers, and also evaluate their existing team for not just the people, but the pipeline and the leadership. Because if you don't have a VP of sales who's holding the sales managers accountable, I'm telling you, it doesn't matter what the reps do, because everybody knows, oh, John, he'll let me get away with it. And so it starts there and works its way down. And while nothing is 100%, I've just found really great results with using data and then applying the little bit of art, to it as well, because it does take both. It takes, we're bringing the empathy and the communication skills and negotiation skills, and that's not science. That's the art part.
That's what I wanted to talk about with where we're going right now. Because with AI, to me, IQ is over. Like the IQ part of this. So it's all EQ in my opinion. And I think the challenge we have right now is that we have a whole generation of kids that have grown up in front of a screen, not engaging with people, not doing full cycle sales, not going to networking events, not like sitting face to face with somebody and understanding body language and all that other stuff. So I think you're on the same page as me. I think that 80-20 rule here is real. Like there's the 20% who are business acumen, have all this shit and have knowledge, and that is AI is going to make them assassins. Like holy shit. Like, because we have context and we don't just use it as the answer. We just kind of dig into it. But there's like 80% of our population, everybody else, I think is going to get smoked. So how do you bring the EQ into a generation of sales professionals that, quite frankly, don't seem to have it?
Yeah. Yeah. And we see that just people on screens that don't interact, that expression, read the room, people don't know how to do that. So we're teaching fundamentals again. We're teaching the soft skills, if you will. And I'm all about it. It's like wearing what was fashionable in the 80s.
Yeah, all day.
I'm going back to it.
I got my Z Cavarici still in my, and I, but well, let's make sure we define this though, because I think some people are might not really know exactly soft skills, right?
Yeah.
So what do you see as soft skills in sales?
Empathy, communication skills, listening skills, the idea of reading a room, whether it's virtual or in person, and how to communicate in ways that, get you moving forward, keep you moving forward and not offend people. And they're not just too short and choppy. Those are really important skills that you need to be successful in selling. It's not just about, well, here's what the data says. We can't just go by AI with the results. It's how we're going to deliver it. And if an AI agent can send the first round to get you interested to talk to me, I better come in understanding your company. I have all the analytics behind me, and I have a way to have a conversation that will make you want to talk to me again or to have a further conversation. I mean, that's critical.
Yeah. I mean, it's a perfect example is like my podcast. I go through AI and I'm like, all right, let me ask every question that I would want. Like if I'm not educated on, which I already was, but if I'm not educated on the lawyer, I'm like, all right, tell me about her background. What's going on here? Where did she grow up? What's going on here? Like, so I have all that, but then it's like, I'm not just ripping through 12 questions that ChatGPT gave me to ask you. It's like, all right, now I need to learn a little bit more about that, the hockey thing with your kid. You know what I mean? Like that I bet you there were some lessons in there that you took, right? And tell me a little bit, and then taking the conversation in whatever direction I'm curious about. But that's where curiosity, I think curiosity is a soft skill too.
Huge.
And it's a tough one. So here's one for you. Can you teach it? Genuine curiosity.
I'm going to say yes with an asterisk. Okay. Because it's just like, can you teach, like we have what we call figure it out factor, like how quickly someone will ramp up. Salespeople see patterns and that's what helps us to move forward. Some people don't see that. And just like coachability, can you teach coachability? I mean, to a point you can, but ultimately you have to bring it. You have to bring well, why was that? Or, an enterprising person that I've just met recently followed up with me and said, hey, you mentioned this. So I went ahead and looked at X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, oh my God, like this person has initiative. Are you taking the initiative? It's not always going to pan out for you, but it doesn't need to. It's like investing in companies. You only need a couple of big deals to win. And so follow up with people. Don't ghost them. That's a whole nother session.
Yeah.
Please stop ghosting people, everyone, companies included.
I was going to say, I did a post a long time ago that said, dear customers, it's okay to tell a sales rep no. It genuinely, that's our second favorite answer in this whole fucking profession here. The ghost, you turn us into stalkers and then we get weird. It's actually your fault, the fact that we're stalking you and annoying the piss out of you with 75 follow-up touching base and checking in emails, because all you got to do is say, piss off. I'm not interested in your shit. Leave me alone.
Perfect.
And I'm like, oh, thank God.
That's all we want.
I lost the deal.
Yeah. Really agree.
Yeah, it's getting interesting out there. I will say I have a lot of optimism right now for the people who have that figure out mentality. I am very pessimistic for those who don't.
Yeah. And handling rejection. You know, I worked with a company. I tell people this sometimes, that this guy that was one of the reps at the company, he had 3 meetings that day when he was in New York City, and he had 3 appointments with deals he wanted to close. And, you know, they all had a bunch of people on the call and everything. And every one of them was a no when he got done. And so at the end of the day, he quit.
Oh, come on.
And he said, this job sucks. Now, the guy obviously didn't qualify well.
Right.
You know, he had lots of other issues where he could have stepped back, but he was like, I can't take this. And I knew a guy once in my first job at Bite Shops in Seattle, where he said when he quit, he said, I was a firefighter. He was a volunteer firefighter. He said, I pulled people out of burning buildings. He goes, this is worse. so you know, not everyone can take it.
Well, just like public speaking, right? Like public speaking, some people would literally rather die than get up on stage and talk to people. So
yeah, but it's just, they're the things that you have to master if you want to be successful.
And I think we'll end on this because, you know, those soft skills that you talked about, you know, empathy, listening, curiosity. It's interesting because those are traits usually associated far more with women than men, which kind of leans into
time to shine.
Right. And that's where it's like, I've been saying, it's like, we've let men rule the world for a while, and we've made a fucking mess out of this shit. Can we just give it to the women here and just see what happens? Because I'm fairly confident that they can do a fucking better job than us when it comes to leading shit. And I do think we're at this kind of inflection point. And it's ugly right now. There's no question about it. The toxic masculinity is still there. All that we still need to talk, like I said, but I almost feel like it's a reaction because they know that approach is crumbling. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's just not going to be the way of the future.
Well, you know, my opinion is like, well, if we're just as good, let's just say we're as good. Why aren't half the salespeople female? Why aren't half the sales leaders women? That's all I want is half. I just want half.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just more like yes and right. Like it's the opportunities. It's the finding the right leadership to that has that mentality, that is inclusive, that does like the diversity of teams and the different diversity of voices and such. And quite frankly, just again, it's people are lazy because I think you have to, as you know, my privilege tattoo talks about, you have to be conscious about that privilege, and then you have to proactively seek it, because it's so much easier for me to talk to a white guy who's say, oh yeah, we played sports, we grew up in Boston, like, oh, you and me, like, cool. But you have to look outside of that, you know, your bubble, if you will. And once you do, you start. It's like when first time somebody travels internationally. You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like you're stuck in your little hometown and you're like, this fucking, USA, we're the greatest. And then all of a sudden, and everybody else sucks. And then all of a sudden you travel internationally, like, whoa.
Wow.
Like, everybody else is actually pretty fucking cool. And they kind of similar to me. They just speak a different language. Like, this is interesting. And it's the same thing in sales. We just got to pick our head out of our ass and start looking. It's
always good to widen your horizons as any way you can.
Awesome. Well, Lori, anything? I mean, look, I could talk to you forever, and we do when we get together. Hopefully, we'll get together again soon. But is there anything else that you want to kind of get to the audience? And
no, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, John. Sales is an admirable profession. It still is. There's still room for people to get into it, male or female. You just got to work to be the best. You got to work to be. If you feel like you can do that and you have the will to succeed, should give it a shot and stay in it. If you're having a bad situation, reach out to somebody like us. And, I'm happy to give my 2 cents and even refer people certain places.
Love it. So you got Score More Sales, you got Women in Sales. Where
Women
can people...
Sales Pros.
Sorry, Women Sales Pros. Yes,
yeah.
yes. Sorry, Women
in Sales. That's Alexine Moudwar, whom I'm a big fan of.
Yes.
Shout out to
Women Sales
Alexine.
Pros. So where can people find out more information about what you're doing, what you're working on? Because again, I think the training side of the house with the assessment and then, prescription of it is fantastic.
Score More Sales, wherever, add Score More Sales, scoremores.com, and happy to reach out and talk to anybody.
Awesome. All right. Well, Lori, hopefully, like I said, we can cross paths here in person one of these days.
Yeah, hopefully soon, John.
One of these weird. I'm not as much on the circuit anymore with the conference.
We're not doing the Dreamforce this year, right?
I don't think so. I don't. Yeah. I don't know. Well, let's put it this way: if somebody pays me to be there, then yes, I will probably be there. But the days of me taking a week out of my schedule and dropping $10,000 to $15,000 and running around like a maniac at a show that I don't know what the hell's going on are kind of over. So
yeah, I hear you.
Awesome. Lori, thanks you so
John.
much. It's been a pleasure. And everybody, I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I did. And like I say at the end of all these podcasts, go out there and make somebody smile today, because no matter how bad your day is going or how bad you think it went, if you make somebody smile, you had a good day, and the world needs a lot more of that right now. So thank you all very much, and I will see you on the other side. Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. With your support and our incredible guests, we're one of the top sales podcasts out there right now, and I can't thank you enough. Now, to keep the momentum going, it would mean the world to me if you could go and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast platform and share some of your favorite episodes with your network. Also, I am super excited to be launching my new newsletter, where I'll be sharing everything I know and everything I'm learning along the way while I'm out there selling every day just like you. Go to jbarrows.com/newsletter to sign up today. Let's all level up and make this happen together.